As you dig into a bag of flamin' hot Cheetos, do you ever wish that everything you've been fed about nutrition is hogwash? Today's your lucky day because that so-called food pyramid they've been pushing on us since grade school is nothing but a big fat lie. It's downright dangerous. And it's time for our eyes to be opened to the dark side of the pyramid. That so-called food pyramid is basically pushing a diet that's chock full of sugar. Yeah, I'm looking at you, carbs, and worse, it skimps out on the good fats. It's like a blueprint for terrible nutrition. And when your body's not getting what it needs, that's when things start to go haywire. We're talking mineral deficiencies, messed up body chemistry, the whole 9 yards. And you know where that road leads, straight to the chronic diseases knocking at your door. I know it sounds crazy, right? How could the almighty government be leading us astray with something as basic as the food pyramid? But let me hit you up with some cold hard fact. Sure, we're sticking around longer these days thanks to advancements in medicine, but take a look around. Disease rates are skyrocketing. Obesity, diabetes, cancer, heart issues, you name it. And you want to know what they all have in common? You guessed it, that darn food pyramid. It's like a roadmap straight to health problems, and we've been following it blindly. Check this out. About 32.6 million folks in the U.S. are grappling with type 2 diabetes, and a whopping 88 million are teetering on the edge with pre-diabetes. Can you wrap your head around that? That's roughly 36.7%, over a third of the whole darn population wrestling with the fallout from their diets. And you know what's wild? Diabetes ain't just popping up out of thin air. Well, there's more than one way to get it. It can be a consequence of chugging along with those lousy nutritional guidelines laid out in the government's precious food pyramid. They're handing us a recipe for disaster on a silver platter. You want the lowdown on the science? Well, let me take you back to school for a second. Carbs break down into glucose, aka sugar, and if you don't burn it off, it gets stashed away as fat. Now, type 2 diabetes is caused by sugar, specifically when your blood glucose levels go through the roof. Either your pancreas can't keep up with the insulin needed to clear out all that extra glucose, or your body slaps on this thing called insulin resistance. Both scenarios, they scream one thing loud and clear: too much of the sweet stuff, aka carbs and sugar, in your diet. It's fueling the fire that burns down your body's insulin game. Getting type 2 diabetes is like opening Pandora's box of health nightmares. It sets the stage for all sorts of trouble: heart issues, nerve damage, kidney woes, Alzheimer's, you name it. And you gotta ask yourself, why on earth are we going along with dietary advice that's practically rolling out the red carpet for disease? I mean, seriously, waking up to a bowl of cereal, a side of OJ, basically loading up on carbs and sugar while giving proteins and fats the cold shoulder? It's a recipe for disaster, plain and simple. We are practically digging our own graves with a knife and fork. You're probably scratching your head wondering why the heck the food pyramid's still the go-to. Well, the truth is, the science behind it is about as trustworthy as a broken compass in a hurricane. They've been cooking up studies left and right, but they're playing fast and loose with the rules. The whole game's been rigged from the get-go. Back in the 1960s, the sugar bigwigs had their fingers in the pie, funding studies left and right. Their game plan? Shift the blame onto fat, making it out to be the big bad wolf behind heart disease. But guess what? Fast forward a bunch of years and we're singing a different tune. Turns out sugar's the real villain here, causing more havoc than fat ever could. And you can thank the Heart Foundation for that. The road to good intentions often takes a detour straight to trouble town. The Heart Foundation probably started out with noble aspirations, aiming to make the world a healthier, happier place, but as they say, money talks, and when the bills started piling up, they had to cozy up to big shots in the business world just to keep the lights on. And who did they end up in bed with? None other than McDonald's, the poster boy for all things healthy, dropping a cool $300,000 a year. In return, a little trademarked tick next to their so-called healthy options like fish burgers, salads, and chicken wraps. It's like slapping a Band-Aid on a broken leg, and what's more, the Heart Foundation's waving the flag of being a non-profit health-promoting charity, scoring those sweet tax breaks. But let's not kid ourselves about where the cash flow is coming from. Before we delve deeper into the dark side of the pyramid, take a moment to give this video a like. And if you're a meat lover, I recommend you hang around till the end. Now let's get back to the video. Let's talk about how scientific studies from the Heart Foundation are cooked up, since they're all about waving around those so-called studies to back up their claims. But is any of it factual? Well, most of their evidence comes from what they call epidemiological research. Sounds fancy, right? Well, it's basically like connecting the dots across different groups of people to figure out why diseases happen. They're all about spotting trends and correlations, and here's where it gets dicey. They're gathering data through questionnaires, making educated guesses, and then crunching numbers to draw conclusions. And you know what that means? They're building a house of cards in the middle of an earthquake. Sure, it might look good at first glance, but it's all based on assumptions, not solid facts. And that's where things start to fall apart. Let's peel back another layer of this onion, shall we? The Heart Foundation's in cahoots with this National Vascular Disease Prevention Alliance. They're the ones helping doctors decide if your cholesterol's off the charts enough to put you on a low-fat diet and pump you full of cholesterol-lowering drugs. In the world of medicine, if your cholesterol's hitting the danger zone, they're quick to whip out the prescription pad for statins. But they're making it sound all official, saying you need treatment if your calculated risk of cardiovascular events over the next 5 years tops 15%. But let's ask the million-dollar question. What's the deal with that 15% figure? What's the story behind it? How big was the sample size of the study they used to come up with that number? Well, while they're busy sizing up cholesterol, it's like they've got blinders on. No talk about the real heavy hitters like sugar, gum disease, even something as natural as pregnancy. It's all off the radar. And don't even get me started on mercury. These factors are the unsung heroes, or villains, depending on how you look at it, of the whole cardiovascular risk game. They're the wild cards that can totally throw off that cholesterol equation. But are they factoring any of this into their calculations? Not a chance. It's like playing a game of chess, but only looking at half the board. There was a Harvard study that made waves linking red meat to an early checkout. They're waving around the conclusion like it's gospel truth, but they made up the idea based on a measly questionnaire filled out by around 81,000 folks. Now, don't get me wrong, 81,000 sounds like a lot, but when you're not dealing with something as complex as human health, it's like trying to paint the Mona Lisa with a crayon. There's just so much more going on behind the scenes that a simple questionnaire can't capture. The sample size is peanuts compared to the big picture, and that's where the whole thing falls flat on its face. And once that study hits the headlines, people eat it up like it's the real deal. But as you know, whoever's got the big bucks also has the media in their back pocket. It's like they're pulling the strings, painting themselves as the big boss in charge. And when they're calling the shots, they've got control over the whole narrative. It's a slippery slope, my friends, but it's all about who's got the deepest pockets. Now, let's talk about the multi-generational study brought to us by Weston A. Price. The findings from the study paint a whole different picture of red meat. Blood chemistry analysis is about as truthful as it gets. No assumptions, no guesswork, just cold, hard data. And what it's telling us is that carbs and sugar aren't just hanging around for the ride, they're often driving the bus straight to Diseaseville. As it turns out, eating a boatload of carb-heavy stuff like pasta, porridge, bread, and cereal is essentially opening the door for cancer. How, you ask? Because cancer thrives on glucose. And where does glucose come from? You guessed it, carbs. And what's worse is that those carb-loaded goodies are empty calories barely packing a punch in the nutrition department. Meanwhile, the meats and eggs are the superheroes of nutrition, loaded with all the good stuff your body craves. So when they're telling us to load load up on pasta and pals while giving meats and eggs the cold shoulder, they're doing it for them, not for you. It's a bad joke, and the punchline is you. The food pyramid's playing us like a fiddle, leading us straight down the path to poor health. So the next time you see a food pyramid, think about the side they don't show you. It's not all bad, but remember to take its advice with a grain of salt. What other food myths do you want me to take on? Let me know in the comments. And before you go, do consider subscribing to the channel if you have a passion for all things food. We'll see you soon.